In the dead of night, 217 Ukrainian drones tore through the silence of Moscow's sky, not just as machines of war but as a message: no fortress, no fortune, and no power is beyond reach. 217 drones arriving at a single high-value logistics hub is more than a spectacle. It is a clear demonstration of how careful planning, disciplined execution, and the intelligent use of relatively inexpensive technology can rewrite operational expectations. Pulling off an attack of this scale requires synchronized intelligence gathering to pick a target whose destruction or disruption will produce cascading effects. Warehouses that funnel ammunition, repair depots that restore fighting vehicles, fuel stores that keep mechanized formations moving. The strike's value comes not from headline numbers alone, but from the cumulative operational friction it introduces: delays in resupply, concentration of scarce repair capacity, and a sudden need to reroute convoys that were once taken for granted. Each disrupted truck, damaged pallet, or ruined maintenance bay multiplies through units in the field who now face shortages, delayed rotations, and degraded tempo. Success at this level depends on layered reconnaissance and precision. Persistent surveillance, whether from satellites, manned collection, or local reconnaissance, narrows windows of vulnerability. Signals and imagery intelligence must be fused to reveal patterns, shift schedules, entry points, and weakly defended skies. Then comes the choreography, timing launches so drones arrive in mutually supporting waves, exploiting defenses that can be overwhelmed by volume or deceived by false signatures. Electronic warfare and stealthy flight profiles can blunt integrated air defenses, while swarm tactics and simple munition variants force defenders to choose between concentrating expensive interceptors on a few threats or allowing many smaller strikes through. The result is a disproportionate effect. Low-cost platforms deny or degrade high-cost capabilities. Equally important is the human and organizational discipline behind the mission. Small, decentralized teams operating with clear intent and redundant communications create resilience against disruption. Pre-planned contingencies, alternate launch points, staggered go times, and multiple communications paths reduce single points of failure. Logistics for the attackers matter too. Fueling, arming, and moving hundreds of drones, as well as maintaining operator rotations and secure lines for command and control, requires its own supply chain. That mirror image logistics effort underscores a key truth of modern conflict: whoever manages complexity better will more frequently seize the initiative. The psychological and tactical effects ripple beyond immediate physical damage. A strike of this magnitude forces commanders to reassess about sanctuary and rear area safety. Resources that previously went to frontline needs must be diverted to hardened shelters, dispersal plans, and redundant stocks, all expensive and time-consuming. Freed from the need for symmetry and platform cost or size, the attacker can impose attrition on logistics at a fraction of the price of traditional strikes, creating a persistent drain on adversary material and morale. Over time, repeated pressure on supply networks erodes operational readiness more effectively than one-off battlefield victories because it attacks the enabler of operations: sustainable supply. Finally, the strike highlights the evolving nature of deterrence and force multiplication. In an era where information and speed matter as much as platform count, demonstrating the ability to strike deep and disrupt logistics sends a clarifying message. Value is not measured only by the size of one's arsenals but by the agility to employ them where they hurt most. For defenders, the lesson is stark. Hardened tactics, decentralized stockpiles, improved detection, and resilient command systems are no longer optional. For attackers and their supporters, the assault illustrates how concentrated ingenuity, disciplined coordination, and acceptance of asymmetric risk can produce strategic effects that far outstrip the cost of the tools used. The strike on a $1.7 billion logistics complex is not merely an isolated tactical success. It reshapes the strategic calculus on multiple levels and forces both immediate and long-term adjustments in how the adversary plans, postures, and sustains operations. At the operational strategic junction, logistics are the bloodstream of any campaign. Ammunition, fuel, spare parts, and repair facilities enable tempo, permit maneuver, and sustain the fighter's will to continue. When those arteries are pierced, commanders face choices with cascading consequences: postpone offensives, shorten supply lines at the cost of operational reach, or accept increased risk to forces that can no longer rely on predictable resupply. Each choice reshuffles the options available on the battlefield and narrows the political room for aggressive action by amplifying operational risk into policy risk. Politically, the attack elevates cost for decision makers. A logistics hub of that value represents years of investment, procurement cycles, and a political promise of military resilience. Its compromise becomes a bargaining chip that domestic constituencies and international partners will notice. Leaders must answer uncomfortable questions. Why were rear areas vulnerable? How will we protect future investments? And what will we pay to restore capability? Those answers can pull resources away from other priorities and weaken the broader political posture, even in states with significant resources. Moreover, symbolic effect resonates beyond balance sheets. Striking a major logistics node in the capital's orbit undermines narratives of safety and control, eroding both elite confidence and public perception of competence. The strategic ripple also forces doctrinal reassessment. Modern militaries that relied on centralized stockpiling, linear supply chains, and static repair hubs must confront a new imperative: distribution and redundancy. Doctrine will shift toward layered resilience, dispersed caches, mobile repair teams, hardened and subterranean facilities, and modular resupply methods that degrade gracefully under attack. That reorientation is costly and slow. Constructing redundancy and mobility into logistics consumes material and manpower, and it complicates planning and execution. But it is also strategically stabilizing. If an adversary can no longer count on one catastrophic strike to debilitate logistics, they must commit to prolonged pressure, which in turn demands greater resources and sustained political will. International ramifications follow as well. Allies and neutral observers will reevaluate the vulnerability of their own supply networks, the advisability of sharing material or intelligence, and the thresholds for direct support. For partners providing aid, the strike sharpens the calculus about how to structure assistance, favoring more survivable, rapidly deployable systems and intelligence support that helps recipients anticipate and mitigate asymmetric threats. In theaters beyond this conflict, militaries will study the incident as a case study in asymmetric logistics warfare, perhaps accelerating investments in counter-drone defenses, electronic warfare, and passive hardening across multiple states. The diffusion of these lessons increases the cost for any state tempted to ignore logistics resilience. Finally, the strike reframes deterrence dynamics. Traditional deterrence often hinges on denying an opponent the capacity to prosecute war through matched material or overwhelming retaliatory threat. But when expensive distributed systems can inflict strategic damage on high-value logistics, deterrence must expand to include the protection of the lifelines that enable force projection. That changes signaling. The ability to strike logistics becomes a credible lever to impose pain without always escalating to symmetric battlefield destruction. Conversely, the threatened state may lean harder on escalatory postures or seek asymmetric counters of its own, increasing the risk that localized tactical actions reverberate into broader strategic friction. In short, attacks on logistics do not merely destroy material, they alter perceptions of vulnerability and cost, they force doctrinal and political trade-offs, and they compel both sides to make difficult, resource-intensive choices about how to fight and how to prevent being fought in the future. Honor the courage and quiet competence of the people behind the mission, the pilots and operators who guided those 217 drones, the intelligence analysts who stitched together fragments of signal and image into a viable plan, the logistics teams who prepared and sustained the effort, and the civilians who, in ways large and small, kept the engines of resistance running. Their work is not merely technical, it is moral testimony that a people determined to defend their home will find ways to convert adversity into action. At the same time, we must not romanticize destruction. Every strike, however necessary, carries human costs and ethical weight. Recognizing that reality demands we temper celebration with sorrow for lives upended and a sober commitment to act within the laws and norms that distinguish legitimate defense from indiscriminate harm. This balance, fierce resolve, matched to principled restraint, defines the character of a just cause and preserves the moral high ground even in the fog of war. Now is the moment to bind that moral clarity to practical solidarity. Resolve must be matched by sustained, tangible support. Material supplies that keep defenders equipped. Intelligence that amplifies their precision. Humanitarian aid that softens the burden on civilians. And diplomatic backing that isolates aggression at the political level. Allies and partners are not auxiliary actors in this story. They are force multipliers whose contributions from spare parts and secure communications to legal and financial lifelines permit continuing resistance with dignity. Appeals for help should be direct and unambiguous, framed not as raw dependency but as the forging of reciprocal security. Supporting a people under attack strengthens regional stability and upholds shared principles. At home, unity is not an abstract sentiment but a strategic asset. Societies that organize supply chains, protect infrastructure, and integrate civilian expertise into national defense increase resilience far faster than those that retreat into divisive rhetoric. Every factory worker, volunteer, medic, and teacher who steadies their community is part of the line of defense. Public morale and civic discipline are as decisive over months and years as any single operation is over hours. Leadership must therefore translate valor into sustainable policy, prioritize redundancy in supply, rotate responsibilities to avoid burnout, and invest in training that spreads technical skills through the broader population. Public ceremonies and honors for those who served should be matched by practical support for veterans, for families of the fallen, and for communities hit hardest by conflict. Transparency builds trust. Candid, timely information about needs and losses fosters a mature public that can shoulder shared sacrifice without descending into fatalism or denial. At the international level, the appeal is to common interest and to conscience. Democracies and other supporters face reputational choices to stand up for rules that protect civilians and national sovereignty, or to allow impunity to erode those norms. Concrete acts of solidarity, increased non-lethal aid, expanded training programs, stronger cyber and intelligence cooperation, and coordinated diplomatic pressure send a signal that the world will not tolerate unchecked aggression. Finally, we must keep our eyes on the horizon beyond this immediate crisis. Military actions are instruments, not ends in themselves. The ultimate objective must be a durable peace that secures territory and rights without leaving resentments that fuel future cycles of violence. To get there requires planning for post-conflict recovery, even as we contest the present. Plans for reconstruction, demilitarized corridors for aid, accountability mechanisms for crimes, and inclusive political processes that restore civic life. Speaking plainly, courage in combat should be matched by courage in compromise and construction. That duality, to fight with discipline and to build with generosity, is the only sustainable pathway out of violence. Let this moment then be both a tribute to those who took action and a summons to do the harder work that follows, to sustain resolve, to care for those who pay the price, to rally friends and partners to meaningful support, and to keep faith with the vision of a just, secure future for all who call this land home.